Hey there, Heather, ho there, Chef Cutter Diamond welcoming you to yet another OTB. Yeah, right. How about a top 10? Yeah, Cutter top 10 video. And today we're going to be looking at the top 10 F1 what ifs in history. I don't really have an F1 shirt, so basically it's just me in my Kitchener Rangers outfit. Anyhow, Formula One sometimes can give you some good moments and some bad moments, but Formula One can help you a lot. So, anyhow, it is always good to know what can happen and all that. So we're going to be looking at 10 of the best moments of what ifs. All right. Number 10 is what if Honda still was Honda and not Braun? Braun GP was trying to win the 2009 championship and all that. And Honda had to pull out due to unforeseen circumstances. So Honda didn't want to come in. And then, as it turned out, that Braun turned into Braun Mercedes. So they paired up with Mercedes, and Jensen Button shocked the world by winning the Formula One driver standings. Of course, everyone knows about how bad Jensen Button was in the old days. But yeah, you know, Honda pulled out of the thing. Braun talked to Mercedes. Jensen Button was the 2009 world champion and all that. But would Honda's name be etched in history if they remained? I don't know. Number 9 is what if Nico Rosberg had not retired? It was shocking. In 2016, Nico Rosberg and Mercedes won the title. It wasn't Jensen, but yeah, and it wasn't Lewis Hamilton. It was Rosberg's son, Nico. Kiki Rosberg was a decent driver, but Nico Rosberg was good at too. So he reshaped Mercedes in the driver market because Rosberg and Hamilton were partners and all that. It was great to see Formula One racing by 2016. But then out of freaking nowhere, Rosberg, even though he was the defending champion, actually retired from racing. It was unknown what it was about, but the fact is that, there was a massive rivalry between Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg. How would it play out? I think it would have played out okay, but then a few years later, Rosberg would have retired for sure. Number 8 is what if Mercedes had not left F1 in the early days? So F1 in the early days was a lot different in the 1950s as it is in 2020. There were many races in countries and all that. The cars were really asking for trouble with crashes and all that. And then came 1955 in a massive race at Le Mans, the 24 hours of Le Mans, a massive racing event which sees teams of up to 4 drivers compete to drive around a circuit, trying to, have the most laps and all that and be the champions. Unfortunately, in 1955, Le Mans was set up for disaster after one of the cars was actually stuck in, and cars were trying to pull around it. Unfortunately, though, the cars crashed into the stands, which killed a certain amount of people. All that. Mercedes, feeling guilty over the whole Le Mans thing, decided to yank themselves out of F1 after 1955. They didn't come back for 4 or 5 decades, which was actually shocking. But yeah, Mercedes, left. I mean, kind of wrapped with guilt. I understand that. But they said that Mercedes would have had changed the direction of F1's early years. Well, I don't know. Honestly, I have no clue. But I think that maybe so. But yeah, I think they would have been good. Number 7 is what if Lewis Hamilton actually turned into a Red Bull driver in 2012? Hamilton was part of a few other teams. He won the 2008 championship, or 2007 champion. No, 2008. He was iconic and all that. And then Red Bull decided, you know what, we need this guy. So they signed the British driver to Red Bull. Or they failed about it. They were hoping to pair him with the German Sebastian Vettel. Now, England and Germany paired up together, not always the best factor, but sometimes it works. Nevertheless, Hamilton wanted to go through to Red Bull, but then he changed his mind and decided to switch to Mercedes, which actually worked out quite well. He had that teammate rivalry with Nico Rosberg, as I mentioned. He was part of a group that had been great German racers and all that. So yeah, Hamilton went to Mercedes, didn't really regret it. He won many titles as a member of Mercedes. And Red Bull had to wait years for the newest driver to fall. So that's how it works. Number 6 is, what if Fernando Alonso actually stayed with Ferrari after 2014? Alonso Fernando Alonso was this great Spanish driver who actually took part in a few Indy 500s and had that spectacular crash in 2019 that nearly killed him. But thankfully, though, the safety features on his Indy car actually saved his butt. It was a gruesome crash, if you will. But anyway, Fernando decided to leave Ferrari. It was like unbelievable how Fernando Alonso decided to leave Ferrari in 2014 because he was good for other teams like Alfa Romeo, but Alonso could have stayed with Ferrari, which is basically the most hated team around, unless you are Italian or German or whatever, because you bleed red. So that's what happened. Number 5 is, what if Michael Schumacher didn't break his leg in 1999? So Michael Schumacher started life with Benetton and actually had a few world championships under the Benetton banner, which was shocking because everyone thought Schumacher and his many F1 titles, 7 of them, were all Ferrari driven. Nope. Actually, no. Schumacher was a 2-time champ, and he was not part of Ferrari in 1990. Was he part of Ferrari in 1997? I think he was. When Schumacher tried to hurt Jacques Villeneuve's chances to win the driver's title and crashed into him. Unfortunately, he apparently crashed on the wrong side of him and disabled his own car. Villeneuve finished the race and won the title, and Schumacher in 97 was actually docked everything. He was disqualified from the driver's points thing and had to do a European road course thing to get back his chance to be in F1 in the first place. But in 1999 at Silverstone, he actually got injured. There was a massive effect as many drivers actually would win titles, like David Coulthard would win a race, of all people. But yeah, Schumi broke his leg in 99. He actually had to miss most of the season and all that. If he was fit, would Ferrari have had the 99 title? Well, I mean, Schumi won the title in 2000, so they didn't take long after Schumi's injury for Ferrari to win a title. But yeah, Ferrari would have probably been more dominant. All that. That's the way I put it. Number 4 is, what if Rubens Barrichello did not follow team orders in 2002? It's always the big what if is, what if drivers have a race for themselves or the teams tell them, you have to race for your teammates. That was often the case in Formula One. However, the big one that actually saw team orders play out was in Hungary at the Austrian Grand Prix, when Rubens Barrichello, the Brazilian driver, was told by team orders to purposely lose so that Schumacher would win the race. It still sparked debates and all that. I would have been shocked if Rubens actually said no to team orders. But he was worried about his job. So of course team orders debate happened and all that. The worst one was in the 2010s when Crashgate happened, in which Nelson Piquet Jr. purposely crashed so that his teammate could get a victory and all that. And they were found out, and it was devastating. Number 3 is, what if Max Verstappen's title in 2021 was decided differently? This is where a lot of people basically stopped watching F1. Max Verstappen was this big guy who was good for Red Bull, who had won a lot of races as a youngster, and basically was the new face of Formula One, takeover from Lewis Hamilton. Max's old man, Jos Verstappen, didn't do much in F1, but Max outshined him. Max in his Red Bull looked pretty good. It was down to the final race, Abu Dhabi. And the winner of this race between Verstappen and Hamilton would get in, assuming both scored points. So anyhow, they would race. Unfortunately, on the final lap of crash, including that had included a Canadian, Nicholas Latifi, happened. And so, to add drama, apparently the F1 race directors basically said that they wanted Verstappen to actually unlap himself from cars because there were like a few lapped cars ahead of him. Verstappen would have to hang on. But apparently they told Verstappen he was free to move past the lap cars and race Lewis Hamilton to the line for the final lap because they wanted a final lap thing. And Verstappen beat Hamilton. Lots of people, Mercedes cried foul, I cried foul, and Bill Lang, my buddy, cried foul. All that. It was just plain stupid. Like the rules were there from the start. You have to enact it from the start. So yeah, it is controversial. And the narrative. I think that Hamilton definitely would have won the title. Verstappen probably would have still won a few titles in the succeeding years, but this one was just stupid. This one was stupid. So Verstappen's 2021 title had been decided differently. Yeah, I mean the Grand Prix finish is controversial, and it probably would have kept F1 buzzing instead of basically saying it was made for TV and just leaving it. Number 2 is, what if the 1982 season was not marred by tragedy? 1982 was one of the worst years in auto racing and all that. One of the biggest crashes happened in Belgium before the Monaco Grand Prix happened. And with Gilles Villeneuve trying to pass a slow car, incidentally veered off course. If you see the footage, you must have a strong stomach or something like that because of the fact that his car crashes, but you see a few frames of a driver being thrown from his vehicle. That was Gilles Villeneuve, and obviously he died. I mean, who would survive that? So unfortunately, Gilles had died, and worst of all, a few weeks later, the Canadian Grand Prix, which I believe 1982 was the first year they changed it from October to June, happened without Villeneuve. They named the circuit after him, which is great in Montreal. But unfortunately, that was hit hard as there was a driver who died. And I can't remember who it is off the top of my head. I would say Patrici, but that can't be right. I can't remember who the driver died in 1982 Grand Prix. So yeah. Oh, it's Riccardo Paletti. Because Paletti hit Pironi's stalled Ferrari at 180 kilometers per hour. So yeah, it was disastrous because Pironi got injured with the crash of Paletti. And that ruined it. Paletti died. That was 2 deaths in one season. And Pironi was injured and Ferrari lost their 2 guys, which was terrible and all that. But yeah, you could say that for 82, and of course you can say that for 94 as well, because that's number 1, is what if Ayrton Senna had not crashed? So the 94 season was getting off to a decent start. Schumacher was doing decently, Damon Hill came out of nowhere to do well, and Senna was cruising through. Senna was ready to defend his Monaco Grand Prix title later in the month of May, but the first week of May would bring in Imola and the San Marino Grand Prix. Unfortunately, though, there was a massive crash. I keep thinking it's Mika Hakkinen on day one, or somebody. There was one famous guy who actually crashed heavily and actually stayed alive. I think it was Actually, I think it was Heinz Harald Frentzen, to be honest with you. But then on the Saturday in qualifying, inexplicably, the Austrian Roland Ratzenberger actually crashed his car and died of blood flow trauma. There were rumors that Imola was going to be scratched and they would have to find another race and all that and try again at Monaco in a couple of weeks. However, basically everyone talked to things, and Senna tried to talk to the F1 stewards, not realizing that the next day he would be the tragic death as he, on the 8th lap, crashed on the right side into a wall and at 180 kilometers per hour, which obviously 180 kilometers per hour is double normal speed. And you knew what could happen. So anyway, Senna died. They said that a piece of suspension actually knocked him in the head in the one spot where, you know, would be bad for the nerve stuff in the back of the head. I mean, a lot of people actually said that if the piece of suspension was 6 inches higher or 6 inches lower, Senna would have been fine and basically, just a crash, then just left the track under his own power. Well, he would have been in the hospital, but he would have been fine. That's what a lot of people said. And people wonder how good Senna's career would have been past 94 and all that. I think he would have finished 94 and maybe left Formula One after that because of the whole crashing situation. So that's what I think too, is that he probably would have left after the 94 Imola stuff if he hadn't crashed himself. But he crashed, and Formula One is not ever the same. Well, they had a lot of safety regulations. They had to do Monaco without Senna. They had to keep going. Well, that it's not that easy. Fortunately, though, 94 would have been the end of the tragic death, except for Jules Bianchi's tragic death at the Japanese Grand Prix. So, yeah, safety was improved, and no one had to die, really. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. I do.